weren't here for the 6:30 to 7 portion, let me tell you a story. Not long ago, in a place far, far away, two gentlemen had a relationship. They sat across the table from each other, and one of them said, I will care for you, I'll give you what you want. But really, he intended to take everything he could from the gentleman across the table from him. The other one said, I will steal from you. I will take from you everything I can. But it's okay. I'll give it back. His intention was to give it to him immediately. Give him more than he already had. So, in this particular story, the gentleman who intended to help the other, even though he claimed to be a person who steals, that gentleman convinced the other to do what he was asking him to do, and therefore they both benefited. And in fact, the person who was benevolent, even though he claimed to be malevolent, at least temporarily, he didn't gain anything from this. Nothing at all. Because what he gained, he gave to others in any case. Everything he gained, he gave away in any case. So I know that if you weren't here for that half hour, this may be a little confusing, but it's the best I can do in the 4 minutes I've allowed myself. So why would this be a good subject of a talk on spirituality? Well, first of all, it's a pretty inspiring story, isn't it? The person is so kind, he's so clever, he uses his cleverness in service of his kindness. That doesn't always happen. So it's very nice to see that this does happen sometimes. In fact, we know from the contents of the story that it almost never happens. Happens very rarely. We heard about many other similar stories that turned out differently. But we got to spend our time with the one time in 3 years when, in 300 occasions, when it turned out in a way that is, to me, inspiring. So it's a nice feel-good story, and nothing wrong with that. That's the first reason. But there is another reason. And the other reason is that in my experience, spiritual traditions are represented quite accurately by these two gentlemen. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Some say, good news. Good news. We're going to give you wonderful things. But in fact, the aim is to take from us. There are all kinds of different words for such organizations. Sometimes you call them a cult. Sometimes you call them corporate America. There are lots of different names that people have for these sorts of organizations, but as you know, my definition of spirituality is whatever you do all day, that's your spiritual path. Whatever you do all day is your spiritual path, like it or not. And so, if you have a job that claims to give you what you need, but in fact, 10 years later, you still aren't happy, well then, that's your spiritual tradition. And I'd say that it's represented very accurately by our selfish friend in the story, who said, I will share with you, I'll share riches with you, but really his goal was to trick the other person into losing what he had. But other traditions, and I don't believe that you can divide these up according to Christianity and shamanism and Hinduism and such. Each of those traditions contains various components. So to me, traditions can more accurately be split into two categories. I dispense with the whole Christianity, Hinduism thing. That's not a very accurate way to divide up spiritual traditions for me. It's not useful. What is useful is to consider, well, there are certain traditions which are in fact selfless, and others which are in fact selfish. How do we tell the difference? Well, as you could tell in the show that we listened to, it's very, very difficult. But that's the only distinction that to me makes any difference. So it's the only one that I pay much attention to. So some traditions, the goal is to give us everything that we could possibly desire. And often those traditions give a sales pitch like this: I will take everything away from you. I'll take it all away. You can't have any of it. And then, in a way that you can't imagine, somehow you'll end up with everything that you want. But first, I will take everything from you. Everything. Everything. You get nothing. Isn't that interesting how convenient this radio program is for this talk? It really is amazing. Really impressive metaphor. So, okay, what does that look like? Well, let me give you one possibility. This is one approach, isn't it? Hi, potential follower. Here is a belief system. If you hold on to these, if you take this belief system will give you everything that you could ever desire. There it is. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm going to share my belief system with you. And then you get to have it. And once you have it, it will be everything that you could want it to be. It will solve all of your problems. Isn't that an approach that's often used in the world? It is, yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Here's another one. Hi, potential follower. This is what I'd like you to do. Forget about everything that you want. Set it aside, actually. Set it aside and be utterly defenseless. And then magically, for reasons that I can't explain to you, you'll be happy. Now this may seem ridiculous. Who would? But given the choice between these two, why would you possibly choose the latter? Well, the reason is that when you do set it all aside and just pay attention to those sounds outside the door there is a mysterious kind of happiness. There is a mysterious kind of peace that comes with that, which doesn't come when we keep on holding on to our worldviews and our belief systems, our fixations, our obsessions. No matter how much we think about the way we wish things were, nonetheless, we don't end up with that deep satisfaction that we can get in just one moment if we listen to those crickets. Isn't that mysterious? And so, if we're willing to try the approach of letting go of everything, we find experientially that it turns out to be very effective. So, for those of you who weren't here for that half hour, good news, you still get a story. A very long time ago, in a place very far away, there was an old man. I'm going to tell you one version of this story, but if you'd like the original, you can find it in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddhist Mahayana Lotus Sutra. There was an old man, and he had a big house. He was a very wealthy man, a lot of money, wealthiest man around, had the biggest house around, big old house, lots of rooms, lots of spaces, and it was an old house, and it had structural issues. It was a dangerous place, but it's what he had, big house, and even though it was dangerous, didn't seem to be dangerous to his grandchildren. But he had many grandchildren, many grandchildren. The numbers vary. Some say he had dozens of grandchildren, some say he had trillions of grandchildren. Some say that he had an uncountably large number of grandchildren. But in any case, we know he had grandchildren, and they were playing in the house with their toys. They had a lot of toys. They had all kinds of toys. Maybe you have some of them. They had lots and lots of toys that they played with, and their toys were in the house, and they wanted to be in the house because their toys were in the house, because they wanted their toys very much. And so they stayed in the house with their toys, and they played with their toys inside of the house, even though it was dangerous, but they couldn't see that. To them, it didn't seem dangerous. It was hard to see that it was dangerous. They just couldn't see that. They were all in the house, scattered about all over in the rooms. It was a sprawling house, you can imagine. They were all over the place playing with their toys. And then the house caught on fire. The house caught on fire. And it was burning. But his grandchildren, not only could they not understand, they're young, they're just children. They couldn't understand that the house was dangerous already. But they couldn't even understand the significance of the fire. He couldn't explain to them how important it was that they leave the house. He called to them, he told them, leave, run away, but their toys were so appealing. It's difficult to listen to an old man sometimes when you have so many toys around. So they kept on playing with their toys. Even though the fire was approaching, they kept on playing with their toys, and he couldn't convince them to go outside, to leave that burning house. Fortunately, he was a clever guy, a wise old man. And fortunately, he was very rich. He had enormous storehouses of all kinds of things. And so, he went to the storehouses, he opened them up, and he took out even better toys. He took out big, beautiful toys. In particular, they were chariots. But that doesn't really matter. The point is, it's sort of like a car, you know. You can tell a child, good news, I'll give you a car of some sort. Give them a car. They like cars. People like cars. Anyone who, especially the boys at around age 3 or 4, right? Truck. That's the only thing that goes on in their mind. So, digga. The diggas. Yeah. So, did I like trucks? Yeah. I like the steam shovel. Oh, I have the steam shovel book. I love the steam shovel book. That was my favorite book. That steam shovel book was a really exciting book. The steam shovel dug things. That was the book. That's a brilliant storyline. I loved it. So, he went to his storehouses, he took out trucks, and he took out steam shovels, because he had big storehouses. So you could take out basically anything you wanted. And he took out steam shovels and trucks and ponies, I suppose, all kinds of things he took out. And he said, kids, look, if you come out of the house, you can have these wonderful toys. You can have them. I'll just give them to you. Just come out of the house and I'll give them to you. Well, you can imagine, those toys were much better than the other toys, the little measly toys that they had inside of the house. That's worthless in comparison. They just threw those toys away, ran out of the house, and he gave them all those wonderful possessions. Ah, yes. So as you can tell, I'm sure this is exactly the same story that we just heard between 6:30 and 7. Isn't that clear, or should I explain that? Okay. To me, it is exactly the same story. I don't see any difference. It's just one of them was written thousands of years ago, and the other one was put together with some nice high-tech equipment this past year. But it's the same story. Saying, good news, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you something good. I'm going to put you in a position where you can have something good. And when we tried to explain it at first, the person who we're talking to, whoever that may be, and for your information, usually it's ourselves, the person who we're talking to can't see it. They can't see it. There they are. The person is saying, look at me. I am a trustworthy person. You can trust me. I'll give you half of the money. But the person on the other side of the table, they can't see the house. They can't see the structural issues with the house. And we look at each other, we even look at ourselves, and we can't see the structural issues. Can we? We can't see the problems, the untrustworthy aspects of each other, of ourselves. So we don't know who we can trust. We don't know, can I trust this person, or am I going to try to trust them and then get taken, get hurt, get cheated? We can't tell that. We don't know. We can't see it clearly. We can't see trustworthiness. The only thing that any of us really cares about, we can't see that very clearly. Not only in each other, but it's difficult even to distinguish within ourselves those aspects which are beautiful and perfect and trustworthy and those which are not. Our blind spots are blind spots, and it's difficult for us to know that they're blind spots because we can't see them. It's very difficult for us to see that. And so here we are, we're children. We can't see the structural issues in the house. We can't look across the table from someone, even if they do have an oiled mustache or they're a nice young woman who's so sweet. We still can't tell, is this person trustworthy or not? We can't tell. We're in a house. Here we are together. This is our house. Our society is our house. And we can't see the structural issues. We can't see what is trustworthy, what isn't trustworthy. We can't see it. And so we live in a world where we have to assume. Well, I just have to assume that people aren't trustworthy. After all, 299 shows out of 300, people were untrustworthy. We just have to assume it. We just have to assume it. And so we end up moving through our lives with the assumption that things aren't trustworthy, that I need to defend something. I need to make things be the way I want them to be and fight and fight and fight. It's going to be me against the world, and I know I'm going to lose in the end, but I'm going to put up a good fight until then. We move through our lives that way because we don't have another way. Because we can't actually see. We can't actually see trustworthiness very easily. It's very difficult for us. Very difficult for us to see that. It's not so easy. It's surprisingly difficult. And we saw that in the show. I don't know, maybe many of you weren't here, but we listened to it because in that it's clearly demonstrated how difficult it is to see. What's particularly interesting to me about this is that we often can't even see that we can't see. Can't even see that. Even that is lost to us. It's so difficult as we move through. We think, I know this person. I know this person. As far as we can see, we can see. But then they do something. And at that moment when they do that thing, what's so interesting to me in my life and the people who I'm close to, hearing from them, what happens to us at that moment isn't just, oh no, this person isn't trustworthy. It's much deeper and more painful than that. It's realizing, oh no, I am not trustworthy because I wasn't able to see that that person wasn't trustworthy. So my own judgment was just attacked. My own judgment was just injured. I lost faith in my own judgment, but if we don't have faith in our own judgment is telling us that we can't have faith in our own judgment. So we're lost. There's nowhere to turn if we can't trust ourselves. And yet we see that sometimes we can't. We do things that we're ashamed of. We hurt each other. We hurt ourselves. We see that again and again, and it's driven home to us that we're these children who can't see the structural issues in ourselves or each other. We're confused. And under those circumstances, well, are we really going to keep on trying? Let's just play with these toys and enjoy that at least. And so there we are. And that's more or less the world that we live in. We have a lot of interest in things which we ourselves often don't even think are very important. If we really ask ourselves about it. So interesting that we've fallen into that position. And so from that position, what can we do? Well, a lot of the time, I don't know, maybe, how do I say this? I'm trying to be polite. I'm not going to be polite. Well, I've noticed for me, I've noticed for me in my, I don't know about you guys, but for me in my experience, one way that I, and who knows, maybe you deal with this, is by feeling like, well, what can I do? Huh? What am I supposed to do here? I'm helpless. I have no choice. I just have to hurt people. Come on. I wish I didn't have to. I wish I didn't have to destroy the environment and cheat people and lie to myself. But what am I supposed to do? I just have to. I don't really have a choice here. So maybe you guys don't have that experience. Maybe you guys invariably do exactly what you know is right. Who knows? But I know in my experience that it isn't so simple. And this is where I'm trying to be tactful. If I didn't admit that sometimes I do that, then I would have to assume that I am just dishonest. Not, if I assumed, oh, good news, I'm ethical, I don't make errors, I'd have to assume at that moment, well, no, I'm just adding a lie to all of the mistakes that I make right now, because it's so much easier to just lie to ourselves and assume, well, good news, I don't have anything to worry about because after all, I'm perfect anyway. It's something very different to accept. I often feel like I don't have a choice, and so I just cause suffering in the world because I don't know what else to do. We feel that sense of helplessness, and we saw that in the show, and we see that with the kids. The kids don't know what to do. They don't know how to understand anything. They're just in the house playing with their toys. And so are we. We just want more toys. That's what we want. And so some clever person comes along. Some nice person comes along. We hope. Rarely, but sometimes it does happen. And tricks us into doing what we wanted to do. Tricks us into doing what we can be proud of. Tricks us into happiness. And I just want to be honest with you. This is what spirituality is. This is spirituality done well. It's a trick. It's a way of tricking us into being who we are. tricking us into having happiness, tricking us into not hurting ourselves and others, which is what we wanted to do anyway. But we were tricked into thinking we couldn't. So here we are, driven by trickery. What do you do with people who are driven by trickery? Trick them. That's what you do. Trick them back. And it's not easy, but it is what spirituality is. That's how it works. This is the ultimate trick. It's the trick that tricks all tricks. So that we're left without trickery. That does happen. There is such an experience. There is such a freedom. It does happen. And we saw it happen in the show. And the kids did leave. And they did get their toys. And isn't that nice? But don't get confused. Don't get confused about what they got. Don't get confused that our selfish friend on the show, don't be confused about what benefited him. Don't think that the 7,000 pounds of money was the benefit that he got. Do not be confused about that. And don't be confused that the benefit that the kids got was that new set of toys. Do not be confused. Do not be confused. Because remember the time when the older gentleman was so kind and offered to share, and then the young woman stole it all? At least he got out of the house.
Right.
At least he wasn't left inside the house, the burning house, which is called shame. Living a life that we know is based on blameworthy behavior. Living a life based on what we deep down know is selfishness, trickery, lies. That older man at least didn't have to live the rest of his life inside that house. But now she does. So know that our friend, our selfless friend, who tricked his friend into being selfless, he got them both out of the house. He didn't allow his friend to do something which he would need to be ashamed of for the rest of his life. That is an enormous gift. And know that as we practice this path, the benefit, the ultimate benefit we get, we can say, good news, I had an insight, that's nice. Good news, I'm really happy now, that's good. I don't have as much stress anymore. I do meditation and now I'm more relaxed. I'm happier, I'm more effective at work. All those things, that's fine. Those are the toys that the old man lined up outside for the children. And it's good that they got those toys. Nothing wrong with getting those toys. Many people here I know have those toys. Enjoy them. Play with them all you want. They're yours. But know that ultimately the goal of this practice isn't to give you new toys. It's to get you out of that house. To get you out of the house which is built up through the creation of suffering. Please know that that's what we're doing. We're getting out of the house, which is intentional actions that produce suffering. That's the house. And it's a house that is filled with shame and guilt and terror and an absolute lack of trust. An absolute lack of trust. My teacher, Harada Roshi, often says, the difference between heaven and hell is that in heaven, people trust each other. That's the only real difference. Or in the, it's very nice, in the Pure Land school in Japan, they say, in hell, there's a lot of food spread out on the tables, but the chopsticks are longer than people's arms, so they can't eat any of it, so they starve. All the food is there, but they can't eat any of it because the chopstick is long, they can't get it into their mouth. And in heaven, there's food spread out everywhere. And the chopsticks are longer than people's arms, which makes it easier to feed each other.
Oh.
So, So the shift between the two, the way of getting out of the house, is getting out of our own untrustworthy behavior that leads us to being less trustworthy. And entering a life that is based on our own trustworthy behavior that leads us to being more trustworthy, that can then spread that trust, those beautiful relationships throughout the world. That's actually what this is about. Even though, yes, you'll get stress reduction and increased productivity at work and all that, those are just the beautiful toys that you put out outside. The question is, can you get out of the house of untrustworthy behavior? Can we not live in that house anymore? Can we create a society, a house for all of us, that is based on trustworthy, caring behavior? Is such a thing possible? To get out of that house is hard because there's so many toys in that house. What?
8:30.
Ah, thank you. There's so many toys in that house that we feel such attachment to. But good news, we have a method to get out of that house, to forget those toys right now. You can do it in one moment. And then you will have done it for that moment. And you can do it again, and you'll have done it twice. And that is that you just pay attention to that sound. It's not what you wanted. It's not what you didn't want. You can't have it. You can't take it with you. Pay attention to that. That's dropping our possessions, our toys, our attachments. You have a feeling in your body. Maybe it's with your breath. It's happening right now. You didn't want it. You did not want it. You can't have it. You can't take it with you. And you allow it to come and go freely, fully experiencing it, thereby turning your attention away from the things that you want and don't want and have and are trying to take with you. It's an immediate solution. It immediately resolves the problem of that attachment to those toys. It immediately works. And here is the sales pitch. I have a technique for you. And if you use it, you will immediately lose everything that you have. And then, I can't really explain how. It'll just work out. That's the sales pitch. If you listen to that sound, or feel your body, you lose all the things that you think you have. You're not thinking about them. You're not at that moment having them. That moment, they're not yours. Because you're not possessing them at that moment. There's just this sensation, that sound. Just that. And there's no other possessions. There's no past, there's no future. There's no person who I was or person who I'll be. There's just this experience. And in that way, we've lost everything. We've lost everything in that moment. We have nothing. We have nothing. We don't have a past or a future, good or bad. We don't have this, we don't have that. We don't have what we want. We don't even have what we don't want. We don't have anything. There's just a sound. In that moment, we've lost everything. And yet, in that moment, there is joy, isn't there? There is relief. There is fascination. There is beauty. With the dropping of expectations, there can be nothing other than perfection. Perfection is simply the total dropping of expectations. Perfection is simply the experience of not trying to get things to be a certain way. To try to get things to be a certain way is to produce suffering. But if you just don't do that, it can't arise. Just that sound of that cricket is already perfect. You didn't make it perfect, and you can't have it just because it's so beautiful. You have to drop it, and then you hear the next one, and the next one, and it's mysterious. How could it work out so well? How could things be set up this beautifully? We don't know. We can't explain it. We cannot explain it. It's entirely mysterious. But with the direct experience of it, that knowledge, that insight, that clarity, and that joy is unassailable. Because whatever might try to assail it is still just this moment. It's still this moment. And if we find joy in being alive right now, just in the simple experience right now, if we find joy there, then we can't lose that. It will always, this moment will re-arise. So we can't explain it. We don't know how it works. We don't understand it, and yet we experience it and experience it and experience it. And we discover that there's something underneath the trickery. There's something underneath the untrustworthy behavior and perspectives and assumptions and relationships that so many human beings maintain. There's something beneath that which is completely trustworthy, that we do not need to defend ourselves from in any way. To directly experience that is the ultimate purpose of this, even though we will certainly tell you that you'll have stress reduction and happiness and increased productivity and all those good things. But know that there's something beneath all that which we cannot imagine. We cannot imagine, we cannot possess, we cannot own, we cannot expect, and we certainly cannot understand, that is completely trustworthy. Completely. To experience that fully is the ultimate purpose of this path, and I hope that by being honest with you about that, it doesn't muck up the process. So, give yourselves totally to that one simple technique. There's nothing to have, and there's everything to lose.